Good morning, everybody. Welcome to class this morning. So this week we're going to be talking about GUIs and specifically how we make a program with a GUI. We're going to approach this module just a little bit differently than all the other modules that we've been doing so far. And I'll tell you why that is in just a moment. Before we get into all of that material, I'd just like to have a couple of quick announcements regarding basically the end of the semester, because that's where we're at. May 11th is the final day of classes here at Cleveland Community College. Your final projects are due by noon on that day. So with, only about 19 days left in the semester, it's important for us to kind of look at where we're at and look at what we need before we finish up. So the module that we're in now is a 2-week module. So we'll start on it this week. We'll have another live stream on it next week, finish it up next week. And in the remainder of the time after that, the final 11 days or so, is going to be for you to work on your final projects. What I'd like to do is, right now I'm not planning on scheduling a live stream during that final week. However, I am planning on having some kind of, maybe like a drop-in session, some kind of open session to where you can come in, ask questions about, what you're specifically working on in your final project, so I can answer things and give you a little bit of help. But I'm not entirely sure how I want to do that yet, so I will let you know more about that when the time comes, or when we get a little bit closer to it. Be on the lookout for a Blackboard announcement with that information. And so with the end of the semester, one of the things that we want to remember here is that next semester is coming, right? And so for those of you who are, needing to take more classes in the fall, one of the things that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to make sure that you are getting registered for those classes now to ensure that what you need will be there in the fall. Right, our classes don't typically fill up, but they have been kind of canceling classes earlier and earlier based on lack of enrollment. So if you want to ensure your spot in one of the classes that you need this fall, you need to go ahead and be looking at registering for that now. Go ahead and register for it now before the end of the semester, so you have nothing to worry about there, and you can enjoy your summer in relative confidence that your spot is going to be there in the fall when it's time to come back to school. And if you have questions about anything that you might want to take, feel free to contact me. I know pretty much everybody in here is either special credit or in the programming and web development program here. So even my special credit people out there who might be interested in doing some more programming and things like that in the fall, feel free to send me an email, contact me, and we can get you on the right track for what you need if you have questions about what you should take this fall. That's for any of you, right? Whether you're special credit or you're working on the degree program. So I think that puts into a nutshell what we've got going on here in the last couple of weeks. We just want to make sure that we're clear about what's going on, because we want to make sure that we are going to finish as strong as we've started, so we can finish and work on everything that we need to do in that sort of way. It becomes a little challenging at the end of the semester. We're all kind of tired. We're all kind of ready to enjoy a summer off. But oftentimes, the biggest push and the most work to be done is right here at the end of the semester, whether it's in just this class or in all of your classes total. Right, so we just want to make sure we're keeping our head up, and we're going to finish strong this semester. We only have 19 days left, so let's keep pushing it. So we are talking about GUIs today, and I'm going to be looking at a specific GUI library for Java here on our live streams. There are several different libraries that you can utilize in Java for GUIs. I believe everything that we have points toward Java Swing, although there might be some different stuff in some of your module material that has you look at a different perspective with a different GUI library. If you're working on this and you find that something else is a little bit easier for you, I don't know that you will, because I think Java Swing might be one of the easier Java GUI libraries out there. And then if you want to try something else, you're welcome to do that. I just won't be talking about it. We're going to be looking at Java Swing, and unlike most modules, I don't really have a slideshow for this one. There's not really a nice, clean PowerPoint that gets us to kind of where we want to be with Java Swing. Right? Because what I have on the screen here now is the Java Swing library documentation in Java. And we can see all sorts of stuff that is in this library. And these all are different types of GUI elements, buttons and checkboxes and text boxes and all sorts of stuff here to render out graphics on your screen so you can have that GUI or GUI or graphical user interface to your program. And so really what we do in this course is we just kind of scratch the surface a little bit in creating GUIs. I want you to know how to write a GUI, because obviously, like when we're doing software development, like that's what we encounter the most. Like up until now, we've been doing everything that kind of exists in the console. But in general, when we're using software, we're not using console-based software. Now, some of that does exist, right? But in general, we're using GUI-based software, software with a graphical user interface that you can use. And so, up until this point, we've been working in software in what we call the CLI, or command line interface. And that's kind of what we're dealing with the console, when you enter in text into the console. And now we're going to be moving toward what you're more familiar with in terms of the software that you use every day, and creating programs that have graphical user interfaces, or GUIs, things that you can interact with, buttons you can click, boxes that you can fill in, instead of just doing everything in the console. And so in order for us to do that, we have to be able to load this library into our Java programs. And so when we're in REPL here, we have to do something just a little bit different than we're used to doing, because we're normally used to going to new REPL and making a Java REPL, right? But our standard Java REPL, like we have here, does not give us the Swing library in it. Now, if we search, we can find that we have Java Swing in this drop-down box. So what we want to do when we're writing our programs with GUIs and we're writing them in Java with REPL, we want to make sure that we're selecting this Java Swing instead of the regular library. So it'll say Java Swing here. And what I'd like to do today is I'd like to take, basically our time to do a simpler demo with Java Swing, so that you can kind of see more of the stuff in action, because I think that's going to be more important to you and more relevant to you. I will also post a video next week with a longer form program, and in the live stream next week we'll create another program with some different sort of interactive elements in it. But essentially, when we get into these interactive elements, we set a lot of them up in very similar ways, right? And I'm hoping that's what you'll see as we get into this program today. So I'm just going to name this. We'll give it some kind of, unique name. And we'll let it load here. And so one of the things that you might notice off the bat is that this one isn't quite as friendly to us as our regular Java REPLs are, right? It doesn't give us a class. It doesn't give us a main method. It doesn't give us that hello world, right? We're going to have to put into practice the techniques and things that we've learned in order to do this. So let's just start this out and just kind of build into this the normal standard boilerplate that we would normally utilize for a Java program. And then we'll start explaining the other new stuff. So what I'll need to do is create a new class. I'll create a public class, and it has to be the same name as our file name here. So this public class is going to be called main. And we also need to include that main method, which is going to be public static void main, and then the string array and args, like that. And so that's the standard boilerplate that we get whenever we open up one of our regular Java REPLs. It gives us that automatically. Now we're just having to write that ourselves because the swing, even though it has the swing library built into it, and it has this special box right here, which would probably help if I zoomed out to show you that. It has this special box right here. In order for you to be able to actually see the GUI that you're building. Because we can look at this window as kind of a virtual computer, right? Like normally we have the console and we see everything through the console. But in this window, what we have here is more like a virtual machine. Like it's opening up like a, kind of an operating system where we can run our program and we can actually see our GUI in this window here. And we can, play with it and test it and watch it work. And so for the time being, right, I'm going to go ahead and skip past this public static void main. And I'm going to build myself a brand new method. It's going to be a void method, and it's going to be the void method that's going to hold my GUI. So I'm going to create a public void, and I'm just going to call it GUI. Just like that. And actually, you know what? I think I'd rather this be a private method. I'm going to change this to a private method for the scope. Really, for all intents and purposes here, you can do it as a public or a private method. It's going to be more secure if you use it as a private method, but it's neither here nor there. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to import the Java Swing library, because even though it's here, we need to tell my program to be looking for it, right? So we need to import it in the same way that we would import scanner or any of those other things that we've had to import in the past. So I'm going to import that up here at the top of my program. So that's import java x dot swing dot asterisk. And so that's my import statement here. And if we get there, we're going to be importing some more information here. I just want to see how long this takes before we move on to the next thing. Because what we're going to do first is we're going to build our GUI first. And then, time permitting, in this live stream, we will add some action to it. I think we'll have some time, so we'll add the actual thing to make our GUI work after we build our GUI. And so what I want to do first is I want to create my window, right? And in Java Swing we call this a frame. That's what you see there is your frame. So we're going to build a frame here in our private void GUI. And every element we build as an object, because we could use multiple windows, we could use multiple text elements, we could use multiple whatever, but we build them all as an object, so it's making a copy of the primary in memory and applying new attributes to it. So I'm going to create a new JFrame, capital J, capital F, R, A, M, E. And I'm just going to give it the name of F. F for frame. Makes sense to me. And we're going to set this equal to a new JFrame. You know, that object notation that we've kind of looked at in the past. But in our parentheses here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in some text. And we'll see where that text goes in just a moment. Right? Like when you have your programs open, you're used to seeing that bar along the top, right? That has your X button and your expand button, you know, the full screen, and the minimize button. And so the text that we put in our parentheses here is going to be the text that shows up on that bar, right? So what I'm going to be making here is a square, just a number squared type of program. User enters a number, it squares it, and prints it back out. So we'll just put square a number in here. And what might be interesting is if we wanted to make it a little more graphical without having to be do a whole bunch of extra code, we could use our ASCII emoji keyboards and do something fancy with it kind of that way. Right, let's just test that out. I've never really done that before, so let's just test that out to make sure that it works. So now whenever we want to change anything on our window, we're going to change it on our F object. So now everything's going to be F dot, whatever. And so we're going to need to set the size of our window. Since we have a relatively small window here in our REPL, just so we can kind of see everything in that window without having to travel around, I'm going to keep my window relatively small. When you're making your program, you can make it as big or as small as you want. Right? Like that's the fun thing about it. So I'm going to create my new window f.set size, and then parentheses. We put two numbers in our parentheses here, their width and height. So that's 480, comma, 300, just to make it a small window. And the next thing that I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to set my default operation, or set my default close operation, rather. What I want to happen with the program on close. Now, we could have the program continue to run in the background here, but we're not going to need that. What we're going to want to do here is we're going to want to make sure that the program exits when it closes. So we're going to say f.set default close operation jframe dot all caps exit underscore on underscore close. And so that's all we need to create our frame. So as far as this goes, it's really quite simple, right? At this point, we've created the window where everything is going to go. It's kind of the pin where we want everything to be. And we can run. And it doesn't show up yet because we haven't. That's a thing to remember. We need to run this method in main. So let's bring that into main. It's a big oopsie daisy. So since we're using a private non-static method here and we're putting it into main, we need to use an object. So main obj equals new main. And we'll run obj.GUI. Now we'll be able to see a window pop up in our box here when we run our REPL. So we've got something here. We've got a workspace here. And you know what? We actually forgot, because I had them lower in my notes for a couple of minutes. For some reason there, I forgot some stuff. We need to actually make it visible. F.set visible true. That might help. There it is. So it was there before, but it was invisible, and we can see how it handles my ASCII keyboard. It doesn't really like that. So that was just a test, so we can remove that now. And we've got our window here for our square number. And you can see what it's opening here is kind of a virtual machine. It's not a great virtual machine. Like, you can see that it's pretty slow. Doesn't have a whole lot of memory. But I can drag the window around, and I can close the program and all that kind of stuff. So it is kind of neat. And we have our little window here. And, you know, if we were to change the 480 by 300, we could make it wider or taller. I could probably make this one a little wider. Let's try to push it to around 600, and let's try to push this one to around, I don't know, 480. Let's see what that gives me. I just want to try to keep it in this window. That looks pretty good. We'll go with this size for our program. So now we can see this code here is what gets me that window to be on my screen. And the big important thing that we forgot is we have to actually make the window visible, because we can run it in the back. We can run a program in the background without ever showing the program. Like, that program was running, it just wasn't visible. So that's important. So now let's add some stuff to our window here. Let's start out by adding just a little text box, and we add those as labels. So I'm going to add the stuff in between here, right? This is why I missed that in my notes earlier, because I push it down the farther I go. And so I want to create a new J label, and I'm going to create a J label. And I'm going to call this L1 for label 1, and I'm going to set that equal to a new J label. Just create a little J label object here. And now I'm going to set some attributes on that label. The first thing that I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to put the text on there. So that's going to be L1 dot set text. And in parentheses, you put what you want to be there. So we're going to write enter number to square. Just like that. We really don't even need that space on the end like we would normally put if we were doing this through Scanner, because it's in a GUI and we can adjust its position. And the next thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to set bounds. So that's L1.set bounds. And this is where we place it in our window. And this is where, you know, we're going to just do static placing. There's also something called a fluid layout, which is a little more complicated. Maybe we'll look at it a little bit next week when we practice that. But for today, since we're just getting started, we'll do everything statically with set bounds. Our set bounds here, it takes four integer arguments. What we're looking for is the X location, the Y location, the width, and the height. So this is going to require you to do maybe just a little bit of math, right? Because it's going to give you the X location, the Y location, the width of the box, and the height of the box. So it can be relatively short. We can make it something like 20 here. The width, width could work somewhere around with this much text. Let's put it in at like 150, and we'll make it wider if we need to. Our X and Y coordinates, we're going to have to do just a little bit of math to determine where we want this in terms of what we have with the box here. We know we have a 600 by 480 box, You know, this is one of those times where you might want to get some like graph paper out before you start doing this, just so you can decide kind of where you want to place things. I want it to be just a little bit down, just a little bit in from the left. So we'll put some numbers in here and then we'll just tweak them. Let's just put like 40 and 40. 40 on the X, 40 on the Y. Now, if we run this now, it won't show up yet. In fact, we got an error message because I forgot to put a semicolon there. But if we run this now, our label won't show up yet, and it's because we've not added it to our window yet. So we actually have to add this to the window, which is going to be, let's see here, F, which is our frame, dot add L1. So now we have it added to the window. Make sure to have our semicolon here. We should be able to see this in our window now. And there it is. And so we can kind of see how it's treated things here. And we're going to want to adjust these numbers just a little bit. I think I might have gotten that. Is that height and width instead of width and height? Let's shrink that down to about 20 and just see that. No. So we were right that it is width and height. But you can see that we're a long way down from the top of our box, and we're still like right up against the edge of our frame here. And even if we move it, you know, it's going to follow it around. It's a little tough to see because of how slow the virtual machine is, but it's all right. So it means I'm going to want to come in on my x-axis just a little bit. Let's try to take it to 100 on the x, and let's shrink that down on the y maybe to 5. Well, I clicked 2. Let's go with 2. Let's just see what it does. And it put it in the exact same spot. Trying to think about what I've done here because it's been a while since I've looked at this. Let's see, my J label is there, and maybe we need to add some other bit of code here. F dot set layout might be what we need. Null. Let's try it with that. Ah, yes, I needed that set layout. Forgot that. Because by default, it's going to try to give you a default layout, so you want to change it and set the layout to null. So, very forgetful this morning. It's a very forgetful Thursday morning. And if some of you out there watching this are familiar with like building GUIs and stuff like that, you're probably like yelling at the screen like, oh, well, you're forgetting to reset the layout back to null. So now we can see where it should be right up here at the top. Now we know that we can move it down from the top. Let's move it down to, let's put it at 100, so we can have it in from the left as much as it is down from the top. We can see enter number 2, not quite wide enough there. Let's up that to 175. Height's going to be fine. Let's stop that so it terminates, and let's run it so we can see where it's at now. I like that. That's all right. Might want to go left with it just a little bit, you know, maybe shrink those numbers down to maybe like 80 and 80 for the way that we're doing things here, you know, in terms of like the design of your program. What you're going to want to do is you're just going to want to you know, tweak these numbers to get them where you want them. You know, you'll stop and run and stop and run and stop and run. And typically once you have this first object placed, the rest of them get a little bit easier because you can do the math on the rest of them and adjust them accordingly. So like for example, for our next object, let's build a text box. Now I've got this text box here. I'm going to want to put a text box here, but I'm going to want the contents of this text box to be accessed by other methods. So what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to actually implement this text box at the main level. So up here I'm going to put a JText field. And let me zoom in here for you. JText field. This is going to be the only text box that I'm going to have in this program. So I can just give it a name like T, and I can set it equal to a new JText field, like that. And so now that I have this implemented on the main level, I have this object implemented on the main level, I can bring it into my GUI here, and I can use it in my action method when we write it a little bit later on. So in my GUI, I'm going to put the things that don't need any kind of interaction. I'm essentially going to do a set bounds and an add, right? So we can have our box show up on the screen. Now, since this is at the main level, I actually have to use this dot here. So I can say this dot T dot set bounds. And set bounds here is going to be the same as set bounds here. Right? So I know that I want it to go. So my height here is 20. So from the top on my y-axis, I'm probably going to want on my x-axis to be 80 again. On my y-axis, I have to add 20 to it because that's how tall this box is. So at bare minimum, it needs to be 100. Since I have 80 here, it'd be 80 plus 20. So that's going to be 100. I might want it to be like 105 just to give it a little bit of breathing room. I need a width and I need a height. So what I might want to do here is say, well, it's going to be 80 pixels from the left. I'm also going to want it to be 80 pixels from the right. When we made my box, we made it 600 pixels wide. So we're going to take 600 and we're going to subtract 160 from that, which is going to leave us with 440. And so that should be the width of our box here, 440. And we'll make it 20 pixels tall. Right, so that should give us a decently positioned box. Here, the only thing that we'd have to do to be able to see it on our screen is add it. So we're going to add it to our frame, f.add, this.t. Good, good, good. So now we can stop this, give it just a second, let it breathe. Don't want to spam it. Then run it again. And now we have our text box here. Looking pretty good. So this is where we'll put our number, and we can go ahead and type in it, right? But there's nothing we can do with that number at this point. It looks like we're a little bit off in terms of our width. We can, shrink that down to maybe 420. Stop that and play that again. That looks a little bit better. In terms of evening out what we have on the left versus what we have on the right. We do have a little bit of added margins in our frame, so that's probably what was causing us a little grief there. And now we have a text box that we can put stuff in. So let's add another label, and we can add another label the same way we've added our label before because we're just creating objects. So I'm going to use my previous label to create myself a new label. And just in this case, I'm going to set every instance of 1 to 2. It's going to be my second label. So this is going to be L2, 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 f.add, L2. Now we can just change the text that we have here and the information that we have in our set bounds. So in my set text here, or actually in my new J label here, I'm going to treat this one just a little bit differently. So you could see another way to do this. I don't think we need the set text if we do it this way. And I'm going to set the text in my label here. So we will set the label to be press the button below to continue. And in this case, we're going to make our width 600. We're going to make our width 600 because I just want to center up the text in this box. And that's why we're doing this way instead of the other way. To center up our text, what we're going to do is in our label object here, we're going to add another argument. So that's comma. And we're going to say capital S swing, capital C constants, dot center in all caps. And so that should center up our text. Now we just have to move it on our X and our Y axis. Our X could technically be 0. Our Y could technically be, let's see, we were at 105 here. I want to give a little extra space below that. Let's put it at like 200. Let's just see what that does. And then we've added it, so let's stop. And let's run. And check that out. We have some nice centered text here in our box. And it's looking pretty good. Right? So we have our box here that we can enter into. Now remember that it's all static. So if we did this, everything would kind of go away. Perhaps next week we'll look at our fluid layout. But that's pretty cool. So now we have a label for our text box and we have a label for our button. So we can make our button now. So let me zoom in here. Come on. Zoom in. Do the thing. There we go. And let's make a button now. So let's make a J button. We'll call it B, and we'll set that equal to a new button, or new J button. With press here. We'll give it a set bounds, right? So we can say b dot set bounds. We'll have to use a little bit of math again, right? So that'll be 100, comma 220, comma, and then our width and our height. If we're saying 100 on our width, we might want that to be, or 100 on our X location, we might want that to be 400. And we'll just keep our heights consistent at 20. And then we'll add this button, f.add b. Now we will revisit this when it comes time to do our action. Right? But for the time being, we can just do that. And we'll get a little button there. And there's our button. Very nice. And so the only other thing that we really need is something to show our output. And we're not going to use that until we have our action. So we're not going to create an action, or we're not going to create this label until our action is created. So this essentially is the GUI for this program, and it's quite simple, right? Like we can edit this up a little bit, make our button taller. If we wanted to do that, that'll make our button taller, so we can have a nice tall big button that we can press. You know, the same thing for our text entry box. We can make that taller. Something like, you know, maybe make it 40 instead of 20. And again, based on where you put the X location, Y location, you know, we can make it look different and all that kind of fun stuff. I'll show you how to add images and stuff to something in another video, because that's pretty fun as well. And you know, really one of the most fun things about this is that you know, we get the opportunity to kind of play with this and do what we want here. So now that we have all of our GUI elements, well, not quite all of our GUI elements. We have one more GUI element to make, but it's not made until our action occurs. So let's go ahead and make our action. Now to make our action, we need to import some other things. We need to import some stuff from our AWT library. And our AWT is our abstract window toolkit. And to me, using the AWT is, you know, it's a little easier to do the actions. So that's what I like to use for it. So we're going to import some stuff from our AWT library. We're going to import java.awt.star. And we're going to import java.awt.event.star. Not really necessary to do both of them, but I like to do both of them just for peace of mind's sake. And we're also going to have to modify our public class main statement here to implement our action listener class from AWT. So we'll say that this implements action listener. Good. So now what we have to do is create another function. So we'll create a public void action performed, and in the parentheses here we'll say action event E. That's our important part right there. Now what we'll need to do is we'll need to take the text from the text box, change it into an integer, and then do our math with it. So we'll just create a few variables here. For example, what we might want to do first is we want to just get the text. So we will add a variable string field text equals this.t.get text. So remember, we created this text field. We created it at the class level, so we could implement it into multiple objects here, or multiple methods. So we can put that there, and that'll grab our text, put it into this variable. What we might want to do is take that text and parse it into an integer. So we'll say int num2 square equals field text, or let's see, that's integer dot, let me make sure I get this code right here. Yeah, integer dot parse int, integer dot parse int, and in parentheses will be our field text variable. We can create another integer variable called int num squared, and that is num to square. We'll just do it the easy way. Num to square times num to square. And then we need a label to put our output in. And we'll do that at the class level, because we need to be able to have it here so it can be read in multiple functions. We're going to need to put the set bounds here in our GUI, right? And we're going to need to be able to put the output here in our void. So let's create it here. That's going to be JLabel L3, because it's our third label, equals new JLabel. In our GUI function here, we'll add the label. We'll add some set bounds. So that's going to be this dot L3 dot set bounds. We'll have to do some nice little guessing here so we can put it down below the button. Or maybe, you know what, we could probably do the whole... Let's just see what we can do by putting it down below our button. So it's still going to do 100 on the X location. Y location will do 280. And we'll say 400. Yeah, we'll say 400 wide, and we'll say 20 tall. It won't quite be centered, but it'll be fine, because it'll vary based on what our output is anyway. We could try to do it a little bit fancier with, kind of like how we did this thing here. Well, we're just going to keep it simple. We're running close on time anyway, so we'll just want to move to the next thing. And so then all we'll do is we'll put, when this action occurs, we'll put that number into that label that we just created. So this dot L3 dot set text, and it'll be field text, right? Squared is now we actually have to take this integer and move it back into a string so we can put it into this text field. So that'll be integer dot to string num squared. and then that will put it in our label. So now all we have to do is attach this event to this button. So in our button here, we will attach the event that we just created so that it knows, oh, b dot add action listener this. And there we have it. We're ready to go. So we'll stop this. We'll run this. And so now if I enter in a number here, like 12, I can press here. Hold on. Oh, I forgot to add my label, didn't I? Because that label needs to be present. At this point, it just won't have any text in it. So this will be f.add this.l3. Now we can run it. Forgetting too much during this live stream today. It's all good. 12 here. The label's here. It just doesn't have any text in it. So now when we press this button, it'll grab that number, do the math on it, and put it out in a label down here. There it is. 12 squared is 144. Perfect. That's exactly what we were looking for. So that's where we'll stop for today, right? I'll hang out in chat just a little bit to see if anybody has any questions as we end the live stream today. Primarily, this is just going to be demonstrations. I'm going to encourage you to read through the Java Swing documentation. Just kind of skim through that, just see what all is going on. But I'm going to hang up in chat for just a couple minutes for questions. If you're watching this recorded and you have any questions then, please feel free to email me. We'll see you next week for our final live stream of the semester. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.